is a real point of pride for us as part of the Biden administration in not just rebuilding this relationship, but actually taking our cooperation to new heights that I think really break through even levels that we've had before. And the challenges that we face are increasing in terms of their complexity, in terms of their nature, but whether it's on non-market economy challenges, the significant security and economic security, supply chain disruption, implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Our partnership is very, very strong, and we continue to work to deliver for our workers, our people, our economies, and work towards an economic order that reflects our values. And on that, I could not have a better counterpart with more integrity and with more heart than the Executive Vice President.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Ambassador Tai for a great welcome and for very good discussions we just had. Indeed, EU and US are strategic allies, so we're discussing how we are cooperating on a number of issues, not least in a context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Of course, there we're coordinating very strongly our response, including sanctions in the area of trade. And it's in generally, it underlines the importance of transatlantic relations, not only economically, but also as a relations based on common values, on democracy, on respect of the rule of law. So we discussed also the upcoming Trade and Technology Council, because there's only a few weeks until it will take place in Paris in mid-May, and how we can use the Trade and Technology Council, among other things, to discuss the challenges which are currently arising, disruptions of the supply chains, coordination of export controls, other areas. We also touched upon the preparations for the WTO 12th Ministerial Conference, because it's very important that we are committed to this and ensure the relevance and importance of the WTO and more general rules-based international trading system. So it's important that we stay aligned and coordinated now, also in a run-up to the 12th Ministerial Conference of WTO, and also discussed how to get some of the remaining Trump-era trade irritants behind us. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to ask both of you about the TRIPS waiver related to COVID vaccines. It's been a few weeks since we heard from the U.S. side that there was an agreement. Then we stopped hearing about it. So could you discuss the current status of the agreement? And also, this is for Ambassador Tai, but I understand that the Dr. Ngozi is in town. Do you have plans to meet with her to maybe discuss that issue, among other things?
So let me start with your end question here, which is Dr. Ngozi is in town. She is a force, and when she is in town, you feel her presence, certainly. I am looking forward to meeting with Dr. Ngozi on her trip to D.C. And we have a full agenda of conversation topics to take up in the run-up to MC12, as the Executive Vice President mentioned. With respect to the TRIPS waiver issue, let me clarify and make a correction. I think that several weeks ago there was a big splash in the public realm around some text that purports to relate to a conversation that Dr. Ngozi has been facilitating amongst four of the most influential WTO members on this issue. No agreement has been reached. In fact, no agreement at the WTO can be reached without the consensus of all of the members involved. So that is a very, very important distinction. But from our side, the United States right now is prepared to undertake our robust consultations with our stakeholders, with our members of Congress, similar to the consultations that we undertook a year ago in April and May, before taking the position decision of endorsing this TRIPS waiver process in Geneva. And with respect to that, I think it is important, as the Executive Vice President said, for the WTO to be relevant, for there to be rules, but also for the membership to come together to figure out collaboratively how we can ensure that this multilateral trading system can respond to the needs of our people, especially in times of crisis. And how many crises are we responding to these days? I think that the partnership with the Executive Vice President, but also establishing trust in this facilitated discussion process with South Africa and India are critical, not just to this particular issue, but for our ability to meet challenges going forward, and also for the WTO to be able to adapt and to stay relevant.
Yes, after interrogation, Mrs. Kari, I would like to ask you, how do you evaluate current sanctions against Russia, and do they need to be more stronger, seeing the situation in Ukraine?
So, with respect to the sanctions against Russia, let me say that the part that I really think I cannot emphasize enough and call your attention to is the degree to which the United States and the EU, working with other friends and allies, have come together, the speed with which we come together, the resolve, and also the strength of our coordinated action. I think that this is definitely one of the aspects of our collaboration that I think that we need to be the most proud of, and really emphasize the degree to which we really are on the same page with respect to our values and the values that we are seeking to defend.
Sir, can I ask you a question? Heather Scott with AFP. Can you talk a little bit about, there's been a lot of talk of EU ban on Russian oil, and of course it's a difficult thing to do immediately. Have you been feeling pressure from other countries for the EU to implement that ban?
It's clear that EU and the Western democratic world more generally must come together and must put maximum pressure on Russia to stop its aggression. So since the beginning of Russia's invasion, we have put 5 rounds of sanctions against Russia, covering a broad range of sectors, and we are currently in preparation of the next round of sanctions, where the question of possible oil embargo or some kind of a form of oil embargo is there. In any case, we are working very intensively to phase out our dependency from Russia's hydrocarbons. It concerns not only oil but also gas, and we already have a ban on Russian coal imports because it's clear that we cannot be dependent on a supplier which is aggressing its neighboring countries and threatening the entire European security architecture. So we are working very intensively to diversify our supplies of natural gas, including buying more LNG from the United States, and also accelerating our green transition, which in general foresees the reduction of our dependencies on fossil fuels. So we recently published a communication from European Commission side how we can reduce our dependency on Russian gas by 2/3 already this year. So it's clearly that this question of moving away from Russia's hydrocarbons is very much on our agenda.
And what's the time frame for possible sanctions, which you consider is under consideration?
Well, as I said, we already set out 5 rounds of sanctions. Currently, we are preparing the 6th round of sanctions. Well, technically, sanctions can be prepared in a very short time. It can be a matter of day or 2, but sanctions need to reach political agreement of all 27 member states. So that's why the political consultations are ongoing right now.
All right, Margaret.
Executive Vice President, you mentioned coordination on export controls. I was wondering, is that related specifically to Russia, or do you expect that were to translate more with regard to China? Could you speak more about where those talks stand?
Yeah, well, when we were setting up Trade and Technology Council, we were looking at different policy areas where we will coordinate, and export controls was one of the policy areas. And of course, at that time, it was set out not specifically in a context of Russia, but it was more broadly. Well, now the Russia's aggression against Ukraine, of course, added urgency, and actually TTC provides us with a very good platform to discuss now also specifically export controls related to Russia to degrade its military and innovative capacity.
Let's have one more.
Hi, Dave Kerr from MLEX. I wonder if I can follow up on that question about export controls and the TTC. Are there particular technologies, cybersecurity technologies, penetration testing, artificial intelligence that you might target for renewed export controls?
Well, actually, we're already coordinating very closely our respective approaches on export controls, because there are all these there, especially concerning dual use, but also number of cutting-edge technologies, energy technologies, other sectors. It's already happening, but the upcoming Trade and Technology Council will provide us with a good venue to have more in-depth discussions. And the fact that we already had a working group in Trade and Technology Council, that our experts were already working and building trust between each other in this area, helped us to coordinate very efficiently and impose those export controls in a very short time and a coordinated way between EU and US.
A few years ago, cybersecurity controls under Wassenaar were kind of roiled the entire cybersecurity industry. Can you assure the cybersecurity industry they're not due for Wassenaar round 2?
So I would step in here because I was once an export control lawyer, but I was very young then, and export controls are the jurisdiction of my co-chairs, Secretary Blinken and Secretary Raimondo. So, Executive Vice President, that's my attempt to save you from this particular question.
Thank you, everybody.
Secondary export controls against China?
Good.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, thank you.